Hey, welcome to the Dear Creator YouTube channel. I am Danny Daniela. If this is your first time here, hey. If this is not your first time here, you are now an in friend. That's a friend from the internet that is interested in going within and beyond as it relates to the content that we consume. So on my self-awareness journey, I find it interesting and fun to look at content and to analyze not only what I see in the content, how I respond to the content, but also what am I learning from the content to support me in the way that I think and approach my life. And so today I have two content creators that I want to share with you. Primarily, I'm going to share with you content from Kristen A. Smith's page, but he does introduce two other content creators, one being Jackie Hill Perry. So before we get into today's video, here is our objective. Okay, here is the question, because as we review these videos, there are going to be several questions that come up. Some maybe for you. I want you to present questions. I want you to share what you may have learned, but from the idea that there's no one that's right or wrong. We're just trying to figure out what is it that we're gathering from the experience. Is there something that we question? Is there something that frustrates us? Is there something that inspires us? Is there something that we agree with? Whether you are on your spiritual journey or you are interested in belief systems, I want you to engage with me as a practice. We're just practicing consuming content on the internet in the most mindful and healthy way, understanding our own biases and our personal truths and our values and how they might influence the way that we critique others or even respond to content. So before we get started, who are the content creators that's helping us with today's experience? First is Kristen A. Smith. Kristen A. Smith is the founder and pastor of the Holy Smokes Movement, a community that engages in conversation about faith, theology, and spirituality, often supported by cigars. He leads the Holy Smokes Cigars and Spirituality podcast, where he and his co-hosts discuss various topics related to deconstructed harmful theology and fostering a beloved community. Kristen is also the author of Breaking All the Rules, a book that explores themes of faith and spirituality. Now, Kristen has used Jackie Hill Perry's content often when he is sharing his media on Instagram. And so today's content is going to start off with Jackie Hill Perry. So I'm going to share a little bit about her as well. So Jackie Hill Perry is a poet, author, speaker, and hip hop artist known for her bold engagement with faith, theology, and culture. She often shares her journey of transformation and faith in Jesus, emphasizing topics like identity, sexuality, and God's grace. Jackie is the author of the best-selling book, Gay Girl, Good, God, and Holier Than Thou, and is celebrated for her ability to communicate biblical truths in a creative and accessible way. She frequently speaks at conferences, performs spoken word poetry, and co-hosts a podcast with her husband, Preston Perry. He has been on one of my videos recently as well because, hello, I'm interested in the Bible itself, dissecting the text, but also my relationship with the Bible and my upbringing with it. I think it has a lot to do with how I navigate life and even some of the complications and journeys that I've been through. And so now I am approaching this experience like a game, okay? We're just looking through it all, the earth experiences, all of the context, all of the different thoughts, and just making it fun. So I want to thank both creators for creating. So let's get started by looking at the first video. But again, here is the ultimate question. Have you ever thought about how your beliefs influence the way you listen or critique others? Are you open to seeing where you might hold biases while standing firm in your values? So as we share today's content, that is going to be a theme. But after each clip, we're also going to have some more questions for those who want to engage in a journaling assignments, or if something starts to speak to you. I'm not sure if you are interested in African spirituality or Christianity, or interested in any religion or faith system at all. But again, this is practicing. So we can consume any and all types of content. We're being listeners not only to the people who present in the content, but also to ourselves. Are we indifferent? Do we care? Does it motivate us? Does it inspire us? Do we want to create more content from it? Do we want it to support the content of our character? Let's get into the first clip.
Reaching for the stars, Jackie Hill Perry strikes again.
In the last days, there will come times of difficulty, for men will be lovers of themselves, passion, Lovers of money, passion. Lovers of pleasure, passion. Meaning that there is a preacher for every passion.
There's a preacher for every passion. You always preaching about adultery. Are you committing adultery? You're always preaching about same-sex sex. Are you committing same-sex sex? You're always preaching about lustful thoughts and ambitions. Do you have lustful thoughts and ambitions? You're saying a lot and nothing all at the same time.
So if you have uncrucified passions, you will be tempted to listen to teachers who accommodate your flesh and give you a way out of repentance. I hope you caught it.
If somebody is teaching you that pleasure is dangerous, they are not good for you, they do not have your best interests at heart, stop listening to them. You can't break free if you keep listening to the people who keep you in bondage.
You love pleasure. If that is you, you will be tempted to listen to teachers who will manhandle God's word and say that the text ain't actually saying what the text is saying.
People need to feel good.
Yes.
And shame thrives in secret. It is very sadistic for them to find so much joy in the suffering of others. And they're teaching people to be masochistic, which is to find joy in your own suffering. They don't have a good relationship with pleasure. And so they use it, again, just like they use church, as a coping mechanism.
Or they will ignore 1 Corinthians 6. They will ignore Leviticus 18. They will ignore Romans 1 because they don't want you to know the truth. Therefore, they don't want you to know God.
Some of us need to do the work of untethering ourselves from this idea of biblical authority, because that's the main thing that she leans on to keep you in a chokehold.
What I need y'all to catch is that people are actually preaching what they are. So it makes sense.
Yes, as you are talking about who you are. The fact that you teach repression, suppression, self-hate, ignoring your feelings, the fact that you teach leaning against who you are in your humanity, marginalization and exclusion. When you say that ministers are actually talking about themselves, you're not excluded.
What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? I want to share some of mine. I think this is an interesting conversation, and I like Kristen's content, especially because there are ideas that we just consume and we make them our truth just because we don't even have the authority to say, this is it. We don't have the questions to form to even know if we should see it a different way. But what happens sometimes is when we develop a belief system or we start to study something and we come across a different idea and we attach to it, we now take that truth and that idea and we want everyone else to agree that our idea and our truth is the ultimate truth. So when I consume content like this, I'm seeing one panel looking at one person and dissecting it in a way that assumes that she believes she's teaching self-hate, that assumes that she doesn't have her personal struggles. It also assumes that people outside of faith are not having personal struggles because they've dissected enough, and it was the church that was causing all the suffering. It was the church ideas that was causing all the suffering. And because of that, the church is bad. We have to make room to believe that in anything that we believe is the ultimate truth, or any spaces that we engage in, any person is we're going to have people who are going to support us. We're going to have people that's against us. They're going to people who are in the churches that seemingly are of the faith, but they aren't following the actual truth of the word. They might even distort the word and make it complicated to the point where people are leaving the church, not believing in God because of how people deal with it, with manipulation. We also have to consider that people have a misunderstanding based off of their history and experience with the Bible. So if I was to make an assumption, which I'm going to be making right now, I would assume that Jackie Hill Perry had experiences when she was growing up, had a certain relationship with the Bible or non-existent relationship with the Bible and God that made her think or present the way that she does now. I'm also going to make that same assumption for Kristen and everyone that's a panel, is that they all had some type of experience that's shaping what they think now. The root of all of the experiences could be coming from a place of, this is all that I know. So when I'm listening to the panelists and we pull out a statement that says she's teaching to keep people in a chokehold, I wouldn't say that's fair to say, because we haven't really digested or analyzed why Jackie teaches the way that she does. We also don't know how the audience is responding to the content. We are making assumptions from the panel's position that everyone who is an audience member feels the same way that we on the panel feel. And they also see suffering the same way that people on the panel feel. And perhaps this is true. I was definitely someone who was a product of confusion as it relates to how people deal with one another in these Christian denominations. And I was also a product of being taught something that I thought was the ultimate truth. And then the manifestation of that was a lot of chaos and confusion. But with all of these things happening, I do believe in the power of our mindset and our perspective, and making room to consider that there's multiple sides to a story, and that we don't have all the answers or present enough questions to even consider that the way that we think about a story is absolutely true. So I'm thinking about Jackie Hill Perry in this conversation. If she was to be in this panel with them, I think the way that we approach the conversation might have been different. I don't know. I think people might, when they feel a certain way, they might still come hard. But if she's in the room and we're face to face, I think that we make room to consider this person as a guest. Like, you're a guest on this panel. You're a guest in my mind. And I want to engage with you with curiosity before I judge you. So perhaps I think, because of my experience, that you're leading people into a chokehold. But let me dig a little bit deeper and say, why do you think that way? And then Jackie Hill can also respond, and she can say, why do you think that what I teach is self-hate? What is it? Break it out. Now, this is a full podcast, so maybe there's more to it that I don't see. This is only a clip from the internet that I'm using for our experience and assignment today. But this is hypothetical. This is the way that I review or receive content, is that we use these statements, and I probably do it as well, but I'm practicing, y'all. I'm being mindful. But sometimes we believe that what we say is the ultimate truth. And if anyone is different or they have a different perspective, it's almost like bad versus good. That's evil. This is good. The way that I think is right. Now, there are absolute cases where we can all agree that's bad. We don't want it. But then we also have to make room for, why do we think people are in the experience that they're in? When I say that, I think about my own personal experience being a product, as I mentioned earlier, of someone teaching a doctrine and it being manipulative, and me realizing one day that I'm just not going to be here anymore. I'm just going to leave. But there are people that I believe are intelligent, are loving, great qualities, that haven't left that same ideology that I left. And I wonder, what is it that made me really feel confident in saying, I don't believe this anymore, or I don't attach myself to this? I couldn't tell you. I could not tell you. I can't tell you. And I still won't even be able to express why people are still in that ideology, seeing the evidence that we see. But when Kristen is in the video, or he's on a panel and he's discussing the Jackie Perry content, he says people just need to stop listening. And it makes me think about when Jackie says you have to suffer well. On both sides, how is that really done? What does that look like? ultimately, we want to be able to see the fruit of both of these sides to say, this way is the ultimate way. If I believe this to be the ultimate truth, I should feel confident. I shouldn't even have to put other people down. I shouldn't even have to, I can expose something and I can share a different perspective with my lived experience. But I could also in that same space realize that maybe Jackie is experiencing her current lived experience, which brings us to the next video. So let's go ahead and watch this next video together. I'm interested in the comments. Engage with me. Write down in your journal, how did you respond or react to this content? Whether you are on a spiritual journey and you're just into it like I am, or you're someone who's like, I don't know why I came across this video, but let's do it. Just let me know in the comments how you responded. Let's look at this next video together.
Black conservative backlash to African spirituality is so disturbing. If you don't want to engage in African spiritual practices, then just don't. But to use the Bible and religion to convince people that practices that are life-giving to them are leading them to destruction is gaslighting. To demonize something that brings life to people without harming anybody else is demonic in and of itself. Why can't we just let people live? If white evangelical Christianity is enough for you, then just live with that. But demonizing the folk who want to do something different is trash. Y'all out here making whole curriculums to demonize practices that sustained our ancestors before we were ever introduced to Christianity. And I know Africans knew about Christianity before European colonialism, but Christianity isn't even old enough as a religion to precede the African spiritualities that sustained us. So before Christianity was even a religion, our ancestors had a spirituality. This shit is dead ass disturbing. Because I know people whose lives have been saved by African spirituality. Personally know them. And you know what I'm not going to do is talk people out of their lived experiences. And for everybody who talk about Jesus, he wasn't a Christian. He was a Jew. He didn't start a new religion. So if you're really trying to be like Jesus, you wouldn't be so hell-bent on Christianity anyway. Because he wasn't.
Okay, so this is how I'm responding to this content. I feel like he's upset. He say he's ranting. I definitely feel like he's upset. And to leave space for the fact that he's ranting, I want to, practice some gentleness here because, I always want to practice gentleness, don't I? Yeah, I rant all the time. And I'm not even sure if any of my sentence structures are leaning the way that I wanted to. But for the art of practicing mindfulness and our thinking, our critical thinking, I just thought this was interesting because, one, I love what he said about life change through African spirituality. The reason why I love this is because we have to make room that people on the other side have had life change through their perspective of suffering in the faith. They may not see it the same way as a Kristen or the people in his panel have seen it. They may actually believe that their walk on this earth is attached to this particular faith or religion. And the reason I say this is not because I want to make this suffering thing something that is exciting, because I'm one of those people where I've come to the understanding that Ecclesiastes in the book of, that Ecclesiastes in the Bible can be both very encouraging and like sad at the same time. And the reason why I say this is because on both sides, if we're somewhat demonizing Jackie in the first clip because that's the way that she and her particular audience receive the word, then we also have to note that that's their lived experiences, that's their choice, and that's a particular audience that believes in that faith. So if they believe in that faith for that temporary time, then that's just their experience. And what can we do in order to snap them out of it? I'm not sure if it's a term like just stop listening to them, but it is presenting this content. It is exposing people to new ideas. It is engaging in conversation together. I think the best way that we can do this is to do so without having to belittle people, because we don't have to assume that the person who's presenting this information is intentionally leading people to this self-hate. They may just believe that. And they may have lived experiences that allow them to look at life a little differently than someone who had lived experiences do something like African spirituality. Now, on this clip, not really related to the first clip, but I just thought it was interesting because we can see, and I can see this even in my own life, is like if a situation changes, I am going to lean towards how I'm like, I don't like when people fight. I don't get it. If you don't want to talk to somebody, just remove yourself from the situation, right? If they make you angry, don't look at the content. But at the same time, I was looking at content about Christian commentators bullying other people and using the Bible as their sword to bully. And I was angry about it. So I started to realize, like, okay, why don't I just stop listening to it? One thing was I was actually learning as well. I was learning a different perspective. And I was also cultivating new ways to advocate for what I think I want to do here on earth. And that's to advocate that no matter what it is all going here, that everything works out for our good and that we don't have to be weary and well-doing. The world does teach us through all these experiences that there are some people who don't care about you. They don't care about themselves. And so a response to that is they make it a difficult experience for other people. But thinking on the good, which is another principle that I find valuable, has moved my life in a great direction versus me thinking weary and thinking about the struggle and the perspective that I did. What I mean by that, there's been times, I mean, this struggle thing, y'all, ooh, I am here for it. I understand that I don't want to be struggling. Like, that's just not cute on me or you. It's annoying. In the beginning, I was excited about digging into the Bible again and learning God from this lived experience that I had. But then it started to get complicated and confusing because I was consuming all of the content. But through prayer and through questions and through intentionality, I realized it doesn't have to be this heavy. I'm making this experience heavier than it needs to be. And maybe my entire situation didn't change, but the way that I respond to it makes it almost seem as if the suffering didn't really exist. And that perhaps someone's perspective of my life is like, oh, that's suffering, but I'm the one that's living it. And if I am navigating through this life by using my mind to the best of the ability, and that's choosing to look at the good, I'm interested in the fruit of that. I'm interested in the fruit of that versus being interested in the fruit of believing that suffering doesn't exist at all. And if it is a place that I can get to where suffering doesn't exist, I also make room to say that that suffering not existing can be in any space that we decide to hold our belief systems. So maybe it's that Christianity hasn't been taught properly. Maybe people are being led astray. But that doesn't take away from the actual fruit or the wisdom that's supposed to be applied, and it's not. So if Christianity and the people that's in it are manipulative and they're leading people to astray and to self-hate, that's one truth. Another truth is personal relationships or reading the Bible for yourself and having quality questions can present a different experience. In some cases, leaving faith or any religion construct and exploring other parts of spirituality is a case. Now, I don't know which case, honestly, and I cannot tell you. I will not be one of these people that will be definitive about which case is the ultimate truth. I'm interested in lived experiences, not only mine, but everyone's lived experiences. So this is why I love this clip so much, because lived experiences really is what we all are holding on to. And somehow there are lived experiences where people have left an African spirituality and decided to believe in a faith, or people who believed in a faith, grew up in it, was their heart, mind, body, and soul, and went to African spirituality. And I can use that same frame for a lot of different beliefs and faith systems. And so when we have so many cases where people have found their truth in one space and others have found it in different spaces, when we're talking to other people, how is it that we don't lead with the lived experiences and accepting that their lived experiences are helping them, and maybe just observing to see the fruit if we're interested enough in someone's life to see the fruit and knowing that it's good for them? The only reason I say this is because let's say Jackie Hill Perry, and the fruit of her life, without us knowing it, is good fruit, and that the people who follow her have changed experiences for the better. How can we, as someone who don't really know about their lives, say that they're being led astray or self-hated if they actually had changed behavior? We also want to push it to the other side, where how can, and he mentions this in this clip, but how can, beyond the group that he mentioned, but anyone, how can you look at someone's life and make assumptions that their fruit isn't of good fruit without being able to be there for the evidence? We really can't say that for anyone. So what is the theory, or what is the goal? For us to worry about ourselves, maybe to be inspired by others to create content, to cultivate the content of our character, but to use every experience and every story as a learning lesson. But my internet friends, my in friends, we're going within. When we're consuming this content, why am I responding to this way? Why does this trigger me? Why do I like this? Why am I inspired? Why am I just as angry as the other people on here? Or why am I just as happy as the other people? Is it groupthink? Or am I making room to look at it from a thoughtful perspective where I'm considering all the different angles? That's my biases. That's my personal truth. I don't know. Let's go to the next one. And this will be the last one before we close out our experience together. Fun.
Most Christians call themselves saved, but they don't feel safe.
Boom.
I think Baptists tend to feel a little bit more secure than holiness people or Pentecostals, because we really feel that God's coming for a church without spot, blemish, wrinkle, or any such thing. Well, who is that? So you're setting free, Kristian, millions of people, and you're giving them permission to be human beings being human and not feeling guilt for being human.
Yo, if this wasn't the best closing statement, if this is not the best closing statement, one, because I put out 2 content creators, and he's the last person and I didn't say his name, but he's on Kristian's podcast, and this is something that Kristian has shared recently, and he agrees with the content creator in this last message. But what I like here is I do believe that Kristian's content is adding a different perspective to the world of faith and religion that some of us are just tapping into. We didn't even know that you could have questions, or we were not even in a position to consider that there's questions. But I would consider this to, if you really are interested in the Bible and really figuring out, or all the things, to write out a few questions that you have for God. Write out the questions that you have about what you've learned and what you received for so long, and challenge yourself. Do I believe this or not? And then why? The reason I think this exercise is so important is because we don't talk enough to ourselves. I talk to myself through camera all the time. But really listening, slowing down, because we are so distracted. We don't even make room to consider that everyone is trying to figure it out, that everyone has different belief systems. Sometimes we're getting it right, and sometimes we're getting it wrong on all levels. And I think that is so interesting, for lack of better words, because we spend a lot of time investing in our truths. And so when it's shattered by someone else's perspective, we feel threatened and afraid that maybe none of this makes sense. And this is not to be doomed, but it's just really to be inspired by just the fact that we can think, and how wonderful it could be if we thought in a way where it was on a so-called good. I'm not sure how people would define good, but I love the idea of thinking on a good and not being weary of well-doing, because I remember feeling weary of well-doing because I didn't understand if I was doing things well. But I feel like I was complicating it. It's not complicated to, look at another human being, and as this clip has shared, make it safe for them. Make it safe for yourself. And there are principles in the Bible that sometimes are glassed over, sometimes are considered to be acting like a fool. Or what I mean by that is some people will see a statement like turn the other cheek and say like, I ain't no turn of the cheek person. But there's so much to unpack with principles in the Bible and the wisdom of the Bible and just the art of spirituality and the fact that all things possibly could be working out for our good, even with all the different ideologies and the so-called bad and the so-called good, that it really could be working out in a way where at the end or whatever, or the beginning, I have no idea, y'all. I'm just figuring out. I'm just trying to be poetic so I can survive America. But maybe there is something that we can tap into just by being intentional with our thoughts. And this is just something to consider. If you practice thinking on a good, if you practice taking time to listen and not asserting your own belief systems onto someone else and maybe engaging in conversation with them, having curiosity, presenting questions, then we might find ourselves at the same table. And I say this all the time, it's my new thing. But at this table, we are going to decide to flip over things that cause injustice, clean up the mess, put it back together, and have our feast. We just need to come to the table. Everybody needs to make it to dinner, have a conversation, and realize that maybe, as Maya Angelou has shared, that we're more alike than we're all different. I love these things that are sometimes cliche because I believe that we've gotten so adapted to the fear of others, which is, it's a true case with some people we should be fearing of. Well, I don't know. Leave that for me to think on my own, try to figure that life out. But this idea that we have to keep looking for the suffer and the bad or the worst in people's thought processes. And I say this because in the first clip, there's a thought process that Jackie is assuming with other people, which could be true. There are thought processes that the panel had on Jackie that could be true or could be false. And really, a lot of this can be eliminated with intentionality and to think on a positive perspective. Because what happens when I think on a positive perspective is that I realize that there's so many different angles that I haven't met yet. I don't know every story. But when I start listening to stories, I'm like, wow, like, that's so fascinating. New word instead of interesting. It's so fascinating to listen to people's story. So I close out today I'll close out today with this one story that I came across yesterday. And I'm just so thankful for the experiences on earth like this. I'm in the sauna at the YMCA, which is a great place, by the way. And it was just packed in there. It usually is not that packed, but it was packed and it was like varied, colors of skin in there. And we were all talking. We were talking about like just a regular topic. And a young lady comes in and she joins the conversation. And as she starts to share her story, I just knew she had to come on the podcast. I just knew she had to come on the podcast because she said that she used to be an atheist. And it was this life-changing situation that caused her to go blind, and her health ended up failing on her. And she only had two choices. She said her choices were to die or to make better changes. And through that process, she found God. Now, I assumed that she went to Christianity, but through further discussion, I learned that she was still on a journey, that she was still figuring it out. And I think it was the most beautiful thing, because that transition, I just assumed like, oh, you no longer an atheist, you believe in Christianity. Because why? I grew up in Christianity, and so I only kind of see that as the other option. But I forget. I know that there are other options, but I forget that there are other truths and religions and faith. So when people talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, when I talk about it, I think about even this space for us to have different belief systems and have a discussion with one another and see if there's a lot of commonality in what we ultimately fear or want out of this earth experience. And I think that it varies. I think some of it is manipulated for sure, which is unfortunate. But I would love for those who really truly desire for us to have wonderful lived experiences on earth to show that example, to really tap into that. Whatever your faith makes, whatever your faith allows you to, well, what am I trying to say? I speak English in America. I would love it for us to just be evidence. And that might come from different understanding of what evidence is, but just show fruit. Consider other people. And I say those lines with so much understanding that it's not easy to just do. But my belief system is that perhaps you'll just keep hearing it, that there'll be a lot of people who aren't weary of doing good. There'll be a lot of people who aren't weary of thinking on the good, that you'll just keep hearing that. And you'll wonder and you'll start to investigate for yourself. What does it mean to be gentle? What does it mean to be kind? What does it mean to be long-suffering? What does it mean to have lived experiences? What does it mean to have your life saved through some experience? To just become explorers. Like Dora, but more like Danny. Okay. Until next time, friends, hold on to you as much as you can. Hold on to your health, your well-being, and your mind. Be mindful. Bye.